Hello, and welcome to Making Creativity Pay, the podcast where we talk to people in creative industries about how they promote and market their work. I'm Dan Barnett, and this episode I spoke with comedian, director, and producer Stuart Laws. Stuart is at the Edinburgh Fringe this year with a variety of shows, ranging from a play to stand-up to saying never for an hour dressed as Michael Caine. We talk about the development of the shows, the difference between comedy in a play versus stand-up, his work directing others, and creating shows with his production company, Turtle Canyon. I started by asking Stuart to give a quick introduction to himself.
My name's Stuart Laws. I am a comedian, director, everything, little bit here and there, some acting, some live, some whatever. I've operated cameras, I've edited, I've been a production assistant, everything.
I literally saw on Instagram a couple of minutes before we start recording, you've done a music video now as well.
Yeah, Fortitude Valley, that's just come out. They're such a great band. And I knew this new album was coming out, and I was like, well, look, I'm in Mac, you're doing Mac. I'd love to do a music video for you. I've got a crew there so we can make use of it. Send me over like the demos, send me over the lyrics to the ones that you think that you want to do, and I'll pick which one I think I've got a good idea for. And then we basically shot it in about half hour. We did like 3 takes of this one shot sort of thing through Mac. With the camera ops walking backwards, trying to hold up sort of like mobile lighting to sort of just help just pick out a little bit, even though there's bright sunshine at times, but just going in and out of shadows and things like that. And I think it's nice. They're very impressed by what everyone sort of did on it, basically. So you've got 4 shows at the Fringe. Yeah.
A couple of them are singles, and you've almost kind of split your time, as it were. I've had people before doing 2 shows in a day, which I think is insanity. Yeah. You're kind of doing weekends and weekdays as different shows, and then a couple of one-offs.
Yes, yeah.
So I guess the main one is Stuart Laws is Stuck. I don't know if you wanted to kind of briefly talk about that.
So this is my foray into theatre. It's not my first foray, but it's my first one where I'm performing it. So it is a play, but it is also a stand-up show. So it's sort of fusion stand-up theatre hybrid, where I am telling the audience the story of the time that I was on an island of puffins and one of them went missing, and I tried to solve that mystery. Then we flash back repeatedly to the island and me talking to the puffins and interviewing them and following clues, and it all spiraling out of control, basically.
So I'd imagine something like that's a lot different to kind of a lot of people's shows, where maybe there's an overriding theme, but it's maybe taking 10 minutes, 15 minutes here from different bits they've got and putting a kind of overarching theme through it. Whereas this is very much a standalone thing. So I mean, how hard is that to do?
So the reason I wanted to do it, I've had this idea for ages, and it started life as like an evolution of my 2016 stand-up show where I talked about working at a puffin sanctuary, and then it was developed as a radio show for a couple of years, and then it sort of like fell out of favor, went as a short film. It changed from puffins to wolves, and then it was like, what am I doing with this? I know what I want to do. I'm not going to just keep just going with what like each commissioner or producer says, even though there are lots of really good notes and things like that. I'm going to do what I want it to be, and then we can develop it further after that, whether it would be radio, whether it would be film, TV, whatever. And so that I've just cast Kate Hammer in as my co-star in it, and they are a fantastic sort of comedian, actor, director, and I think as a duo we're going to really sort of work well together in sort of like exploring it even more. But like how it started was I just wrote 40 pages, booked in a preview in October last year at the Bill Murray, knowing I didn't have an end, knowing I didn't really know what it was, knowing that certain chunks of it were literally just stand-up ideas I had and hadn't really fleshed out very much. I was like, just do it, perform it, then chat to the audience. I think we had like 30 people at the Bill Murray who were like gathered, who were like, they're hardcore, wanted to see a play about a puffin. And it was so useful. And then I spent a few months ruminating on it, playing around with different ideas, worked out what the play was actually about, then rewrote it, did a preview on Next Up online, which I found so useful because you can read it out from the screen. You're playing with a different interaction with the audience, so you're not as like, you're not trying so hard to be as like live. You can sort of trust the words on the page a bit more and know that the audience are watching in a slightly different way. They're watching slightly more like a TV show. And from that is now just been a case of like, what has happened is I've gotten rid of almost all of the stand-up-y bits that started life as stand-up bits because they aren't appropriate. They were just like me trying to shoehorn bits in and then reframing it to be like, oh, maybe it's about this that is thematically relevant. And then every time I've done 4 previews now, knowing that I get to those bits that they're the bits that the audience like laugh at, but are like sort of like, how have we got here? And it's sort of weirdly the laughs and the value of that is detracting from the narrative. And the point of doing this was to do something that is narratively very pleasing and feel like it has an interesting plot and is hitting punchlines every 25 to 30 seconds rather than every 6 to 8 seconds, which I think is just too much to do in a year. And we all try it, but it is so impossible unless you are like the best and funniest and the only thing you do is just work every single day on doing a show. So it's like, like my show last year I really enjoyed doing and loved it, and like, but I would say it really started to hit its stride in like the last 10 days of the Fringe and then really took off more on tour as those bits had time. So I think 18 months is a good amount of time to write a show, and a year is just, you are sort of having to be like, well, that bit's not quite as funny, but I'll keep doing it because I need to fill the time. And I haven't got time to fix it at the moment because I'm doing this, that, and the other. So this was something to do, which was like, I think I'm good at structure and telling stories. I'd love to just focus in on doing that. And the fact that it's marketed as a play and a stand-up and a comedy show means that you don't have to hit the punchlines quite as hard, and it's sort of actually quite refreshing to be on stage not doing that. It's always generally in the area of amusing, but it's not like which is such a difficult rhythm, especially in a play, in a narrative where you're just like, I would just love to relax a little bit and just enjoy what the plot is.
Obviously you built up a following, plenty of people who know you've got plenty of experience. But for something like that, is that going to then be, do you kind of worry, or are you pretty confident about kind of selling it and getting people in, or you know?
Absolutely no idea, if I'm honest. And that's sort of like, there is a freedom now in that, like, I'm doing all right, and have various different ways that like my bills are getting paid that are all to do with comedy, and that is like a nice position to be in a position as well where I'm not big enough for like a creative swing like this to be so threatening to my livelihood, in that like, I've got a really strong club set now from like the past 2 years of doing personal shows at the Fringe, which I'm very proud of, and that I can go out to any club and seem to like just it works, and it is unique, and it's me, and it's saying personal things, but it still works in a club setting. So I'm like, great, I got that, I can make money from that if I want to. And I'm also not like, I'm not small enough that doing something like this might write me off to a bunch of people. It's sort of like, I feel in a good position to be like, I'm doing something really like off the charts this year compared to what is expected from the Fringe, and I think I will get away with it even if it's a fucking disaster. And it might be, and that will be funny in its own way, and I'll have learnt a lesson, and hopefully my stand-up show that I'm doing there on Fridays and Saturdays will give me enough new material to have a new show to like start working on for a tour next year.
And without getting too wanky about talking about personal brand and all this kind of thing, but the kind of thing, your Stuart's like, it is very you. Yes, something about a puffin sanctuary. That's totally Stuart Lowe's.
Yeah, and I feel like the 45 to 50 people who are interested in seeing what I do, like they're going to be like, oh, great, he's doing this. He's leaning into this more. that's really fun. And I also feel like it's sort of an interesting like evolution from 2023. I did a show where I talked about my real life for the first time, and it started with me lying, and it ended with me telling a very vulnerable truth about grief and about permanence. Then last year I did a show all about relationships and about being confirmed as autistic later in life, and how when you've only just been able to have a proper relationship even with yourself, how that changes your perspective on things. Those are like weighty topics in amongst very stupid, silly material. It was like, this feels like a natural evolution of that if people have seen those and liked them, and in general it felt like they went well, that like this isn't like, what the fuck has he done here? This is still similar style of comedy, but with like a stylistic shift to it. So it's like recognizably a show by me, and if you like that, I think you will like this. And the responses have been really good so far in preview, and they've been so ropey. Like, there's been no tech, it's been reading out from an iPad, it's been like exploring stuff, and the response has been really good in a way that I'm trying not to get too carried away with. I'm just trying to get my head down and keep writing and rewriting to get it in a good place, so that by the end of July I can sort of lock it off a bit and be like, right, now we spend a month learning it and honing it and just getting those words word perfect, basically.
Like I say, and kind of the stuff you do, like I said, I don't want to say, oh, you subvert the art form or anything like that, kind of get to this, but you are willing to try different things. I remember something on Next Up, I think it was during the lockdown, where part of it was a standard stand up, and then you did the rest of it in a car.
Yeah, and that is it, and that's what, like, genuinely, it's one of my favorite shows that I've done was that. And it is like, it was me going like, if I'm going to just read it out down the lens, how can this form be adapted to be something that is interesting and is something that people haven't seen before? And I know that like everything has been done before, but like, if you can take elements and you can be like, I'm taking that and I'm doing that, but I'm like repurposing it in this way to tell this story, and I don't think that's been done before, or it hasn't been done in this particular way, I think there is something interesting in that. That's not to say that like just doing straight stand-up is bad. Some of my favorite shows I watch are just literally, you go in and it is 55 minutes of just pure gags, and you're like, that's perfect. But I don't think I can do that. So I'm always like, how can I elevate what I can do to an area that is like, it's both funny, and interesting, and like takes you on a different journey. And I'd say, like, to some people I am maybe their favorite comedian, and that is very nice, but to some people they'd think I'm not doing comedy. So that's like what is great about stand-up. And like, there's routines that I've had in shows where like people have come back multiple times and have lost their shit multiple times at the same routine, which has died on its arse in other days, where you're just like, that is the beauty of it, is that like, I'm doing it for that specific people, and over time, as a comedian, your job is to widen out how many people you're doing the jokes for and then choosing where if you want to broaden it out any further, or whether you're happy with like the target you've acquired. And like, I think the last few years I've widened that out more than I ever have. And I am like excited to take this step now with the skills I have to be like, right, now I'm doing a play/stand-up hybrid. How broad can I make this while still maintaining like nuance and the interesting things that I want to do?
Yeah. I mean, it must be hard to have that balance. Previous guests said they'd rather be 9 people's favorite comedian than 100 people's 9th favorite comedian.
Yeah.
But obviously, you'd ideally want 100 people to be 100 people's favorite comedian. And so there's that kind of balance of, a lot of people will say, well, I make it for me, and if people like it, that's great. But whether they really mean that or not, I don't.
No, none of them mean that. That is lying at the top level. No one in this industry is doing it just for themselves. They want an audience to tell them how great they are. That is it. It's a narcissism straight away. There's no way. I'm not buying that from any of these schmucks that you've had on this podcast. I'm calling every single one of them out. You're not doing it just for you. You're doing it because you want to be adored. That's what's happening.
Yeah. And so, yes, so your other couple of shows, you've got the beer mat flipping, which I think is a great example of kind of, if you get funny people in a room, the concept doesn't matter so much, without wishing to denigrate beer mat flipping, the concept doesn't matter so much. You will have a good time regardless.
Yeah, and like it's something that I started because I noticed repeatedly whenever I did it out with friends, everyone would start joining in, and then people would get overexcited, and it became a thing that you couldn't take your eyes off. And Harriet Kemsley did the very first one, and she is dreadful at it. That is fair to say. Couldn't do it. But she was like watching it from the sidelines after being knocked out, being like, I don't think I've ever cared about sport before until I was watching that final. And there is something visceral about just seeing those mats flip over and seeing them get caught or get missed. That is like, it does add that little extra element, because you've got everyone being funny, and the whole point of it and the reason, like when me and Sakisa book those lineups, we want it to be like a diverse range of like comedians who we think will play well with each other. And we've been so lucky with who we've had on, but like to have, someone like Helen Bauer going up against, Phil Wang in the final is just like, such contrasting energies is really, really fun to like, and to see who gets really into the sport and who just gets into the comedy side of things. And for me, it's fun because Sakisa's such a great host that I'm like, great, I just can trust her to do that. And it's like I get to sort of take a little back step and just chip in with funny stuff and sort of move it along on like the technical side every now and then. And it's such like it's the closest a show is to like feeling like no work whatsoever. It's just like, great, I'm just up here having fun. And the fact that there is like a room full of people also enjoying it is just like, oh, this is great. This is why I started doing comedy, was like wanting to like do stuff like this and have people turn up.
Yeah, absolutely. And then your other show is Michael Caine Say Never for an hour.
Yeah.
I kind of saw that when it kind of came out, I think on Twitter as it was then. And obviously it's kind of grown. I don't know if you want to kind of briefly talk. I mean, I suppose it's in the title.
Stuart Laws as Michael Caine Saying Never for 1 hour is like, it's 5 years now since that came out on Twitter. It was in lockdown. I just posted a video, 90 seconds, of me as Michael Caine, single shot, no edits, with voiceover of me, recorded by me playing Christopher Nolan and Christian Bale. The scene from Batman Begins where Christian Bale, Bruce Wayne, says, you still haven't given up on me. And then Michael Caine just goes, never. It's such an odd line reading. It always stuck out to me. I think I was chatting with Phil Wang and Pierre Novelli about it, like on Zoom, just joking around about it, and we were just having a real fun laugh about it. I was like, oh, maybe I should record that tomorrow. Recorded it, put it out. It went viral. I had no idea why. I was so excited it did. Like I watch it back and I'm like, this is slow. This could pick up the pace real. Like if I was doing it now with like algorithms in mind, I would be chopping, trying to get it as fast as possible. But it says something about the authenticity of it, that like people were just really engaged with it, and because it's a fun vocal stim. People love saying never. I've received countless videos from friends of their kids saying never. It's so cute. Really great. And then I did a fake poster of me as if I was performing it at the Palladium coming up. And I thought, that's fun. I've done like a bunch of like fake things, like the BAFTA nominations and like my image there as if I got nominated for that, all over the place. Just mucking around, to the point that people have expressed like shock when a thing that sounds unbelievable actually is true. Like people have been like, oh, I thought this was another one of your jokes. I didn't realize this was an actual thing you were doing. And someone was like, I really did want to see it. I was excited to maybe go and see it live. So I was like, oh, okay. I booked it in at the Bill Murray, when was it? 2023. But then I needed a preview night for my show, so I actually just said I'll keep the date, but I'll just do it as a preview instead. So then 2024, I think they'd asked, do you want to do it again? And I was like, I'm doing Edinburgh. I'll email David at Monkey Barrel and say like, any interest in this? Didn't reply for like 5 weeks, and then just replied saying like, this date at this time at the Tron, do you want it? And I was like, oh shit, okay, yeah, I'll do it. Asked Nish and Amy whether they would play Christopher Nolan, Christian Bale respectively. Didn't think much of it, and it went on sale, and I'd check ticket sales every now and then and was like, holy shit, this one's really just rocketing up. And then suddenly had this like, we're gonna have to really think about this beyond just rocking up. So we had a couple of meetings of just like, how do we make this last an hour of me saying that line and getting it wrong and you asking me to say it again. And I wrote a 60-page script for it, which we never used. I just did it as an exercise in myself of like what interesting ideas would come out if I'm writing, just to have them locked away in case we'd lull at some point. And it was probably my most fun experience on stage ever. Just, I don't know how many people were in there, but it was like absolutely rammed. People turned away. And it was the only people that were in that room were people who were desperate to see that show, and no one knew what that show was. That never happens. If I'm doing my show on tour, I've got maximum 50 to 60% of people who are desperate to see that show, and the rest are people who are going, oh, we'll take a chance on this, see what it is. That was only people desperate to see it, and the goodwill in the room and the energy of it was just so great. And so, yeah, we've booked in again to do it. Bigger venue, but I think still in the territory of like exciting enough and small enough. Slightly better shape, I think, because people can just see every person on stage, whereas I think some people I had my back to them the entire time. And the idea is, if it goes well enough and we find it fun, to maybe book in a big venue in London, do it next year, and have a proper film set and cameras and crew who are all part of it, and it's, it lasts 75 minutes, and it's like a real big production that basically probably will cost me thousands of pounds, and it will be the biggest vanity project of all time. But then I can then throw away that dressing gown and say goodbye to that, and people can say there were 4 performances of it ever live. Edinburgh 24, Mac 25, Edinburgh 25, London 25, 26. And people were like, did you see it live? And it would be like, no, only, how many people would that be? The room in Mac was like 40 people, I think, or 30, I think it was 35, but we crammed 40 people in. So that would be 120. It's 120 this year, 240. 440 people in total will have ever seen it if we do.
Plus the Albert Hall.
Yeah, and then of course what will happen is that that will be my biggest success. It'll get commissioned for TV, and we'll have to do 6 episodes somehow.
I mean, you're talking about stories and that kind of stuff and possibly making things up. I mean, something that's happened in the last week is that you've gone viral for something else.
Oh, yeah.
A story in a toilet. And again, like I say, I could go completely either way about whether that's real or made up. It's the kind of thing that could happen, but it's totally the kind of thing I could see you making up as well. You know what I mean? Don't have to go the other way.
And I would respect that from someone in comedy who knows comedy and knows of my stuff to come in and be like, is that real? But like, I would also expect that person to not put it online and be like, is this real? To just sort of have that conversation themselves and try and work it out, or maybe send a DM and be like, is that real? It's the people online who it's their life is to reply to things that are funny and seem like real with that didn't happen, why are you fucking lying, that sort of thing, where you're just like, it's somebody who is so angry that someone might be out in the world trying to get likes on a platform which is designed to just I don't know what people think social media is for, beyond, I don't know, putting out awful opinions. I'll say this, that one is true. That did happen. I couldn't believe it. I was so excited. I came out, I was doing a preview with Heidi Regan, and I was like, you won't believe what's just happened. And she was like, are you going to tweet about it? And I've so forgotten about Twitter that I was like, no, I put it on Blue Sky. And she was like, you got to put it on Twitter. And I put it on there, and it absolutely blew up in a way that is like old school Twitter, where it was like so many of the replies were just like joyous, fun, and then about 10% were like accusing me of being a pedo, or telling me there's no way. What's my problem? There's something wrong with you, mate. Why are you even making up this shit? And then there was a TERF came out because, you know, it was about a bathroom, so of course their worm brains are broken, that anytime a toilet is mentioned, that their only thing they can react to is like, gender. Like that, it is just, Twitter is just a cesspool now of mental health crises.
That's good to know. Yeah, because it's the kind of thing that, yes, when I saw it first, I thought totally plausible. And then, you know, as it kind of grew, I was kind of thinking, you know, it's the kind of thing I could see you doing. Because I mean, one of the other things when you talk about different platforms is I'm hardly ever on Threads, but whenever I am, I see you saying "Gotta be Stuart Laws."
Yeah.
I was scrolling through your replies on Threads, and like I think there's like one proper reply to someone talking about Spurs, but then everything else is "Gotta be Stuart Laws." I mean, was there something that sparked that?
I can't remember what it was. I remember like everyone tried to move to Threads, and I was like, well, it's easy to sign up for an account. Let's have a little look at it. And then I saw how much like rage bait or like, you know, like reply farming or whatever it's called, where it's like people do reply tweets or threads that are designed to make people reply because that's good for the algorithm. And I did a few that were like really stupid, like versions of that, where it was like a photo of like some toast and some marmalade. And I was like, sorry, my wife keeps trying to call these toast and marmalade when I think we all know it's a flatty tea and marm's a clock or something like that. What do you call it in your country? Stupid stuff like that, where I'm just being like, again, it's the whole thing is like, right, someone's established a precedent. How can I come in and undermine it or subvert it in some way? Then I saw a bunch that was to do with like, name your worst comedian, blah blah blah. And I was like, that's funny to reply with as myself. And then as I started replying to those, just spotted more where it's like appropriate for me to reply, gotta be Stuart Laws. And now it's just become a thing where I'm like, I'm not going to do anything else on Threads. I know that Threads auto posts your Instagram posts sometimes, but not other times. I'm like, fine, that does whatever it does. The only times I'm actively on Threads now is to write. Every now and then, a couple of weeks, I'll go, oh, let's have a look on Threads. And then immediately there's a bunch, including people that like I've obviously done it to them before, but like I haven't noticed because I just don't pay attention to who the person is. Occasionally I've got to be careful because it's like a comic has done a thread that's annoying that I'm like, oh, I'll reply. Oh no, I can't because I know that person. That would be shitty.
Going back to Edinburgh, I was looking at the film you put together, Debuts documentary, saying that you were first there in 2013, and then the film on YouTube goes through 5 comedians in 2022.
Yes.
Was that just something that you kind of had an itch and you were interested in kind of following people through, or was there any kind of thing that started it?
Yes. Well, what really started it was that Esther Manito got accommodation sorted and asked me, do you need a room for Edinburgh? And I did not have a plan to do a show that year. I just had done the Zoom show, Stuart Law's Single Father of None, which was a chunk of material of what I was going to do in 2020 before it got cancelled. Partly I'm delighted it got cancelled because that show would not have been ready in any way. It was nowhere near being ready. And then, so when everything went online in 2021, I was offered the chance to do that Zoom show. I was like, oh, that's good. Yeah, I can repurpose bits and basically burn everything in that show. And it was very specific to online, and whole bits of it would never work in real life. But just didn't have anything. And was also pretty much feeling like I was about to do the show about long grief and permanence, the serious sort of evolution of me. And I was like, I don't want to rush that. So that will be 2023. But this is a good room. I like Esther. I like Lily. I like Josh. I hadn't met Josh, but like I'd sort of had a call with him or something, and I'd seen his comedy and was like, that would be a fun month. I like going to Edinburgh. So I was like, well, I know how to operate a camera. I have access to them. You know what is interesting is that Lily and Josh are both doing their debut. I'm directing Sakisa, or I was working with Sakisa on her show that year. That would be really fun to follow Sakisa, Lily, and Josh. And then I know Amy Gledhill a bit. I think that's an interesting story coming from sketch. And I was like, this is a show. This is something that I would watch. Like I'd watch like the John Ronson documentary. up there. I'd watched a load of different documentaries from up there. I was like, I'd like to just be able to, this feels like the best opportunity to get up there and film something that no one else could film, because no one else is going to allow a camera crew in their bedroom whilst they're getting ready. No one else is going to allow such intimate access of like backstage as you've just had a shit gig, or all of those sort of things. And also, like, I get it. I know what they're going through. I know what's happening. I know, how to film these things in a way that is not too intrusive. And so I was like, I just want to do it. And I'd spoken to a couple of production companies about whether there was like interest in co-producing, and but ultimately I was like, this is just something that, like, if we sell it afterwards, great, but I just want to be able to make it and then see what happens. And then we spent like a year going back and forth, talking to commissioners, talking to production companies, getting notes, going back and forth, changing the whole format, deciding whether it was going to be like a 6-part series. And eventually I was just like, this is not going anywhere. It needs to go out. I don't want to have it just on my hard drive as a relic of like, here's a thing that was shot once. And so I was like, I'm recutting it. It's going to be a feature. And I think the key to do it is to like present it as myself, because that is like the way to make it like funny, but like I'm such a presence in like on camera and talking to them that it would suddenly be odd to suddenly strip that away and to do this really formal, like, I joined them on the first day of the Fringe. To like, it needed to be in there, not from like an ego point of view, but it is like an authored film, that it would be odd if it was like, who made this? What's going on? Why is he part of it sometimes? So I was like, I just need to make something of that. And I think I actually, Lorna Rose Treen gave some notes on an early edit of it. And one of the things that she said was like, I'd be interested in more from you on it as someone who has gone through it and has done it. And that's an interesting way of getting across perspective. Because originally we were going to have interviews with like comedians who had done it before, people like Nish, people like Aisling B or Rosie Jones, and I think we'd spoken to a couple of them about possibly doing it. But then that became another whole thing that we were like, I don't quite know. It suddenly becomes 2 competing storylines of like these 5 comics, Anthony as well, who's an American comic, New York comic, who's fantastic, and then that adds a new perspective to it. And then trying to navigate a narrative with older, more experienced comics who have done it, and then trying to thread that all together. It was like, this is sprawling, let's just narrow it down, and all of the bits that we need to just get information across, if I do it as entertainingly, as interestingly as possible, that might just help speed it up, compress it down, keep a bit more of like, I haven't seen a film done in that way where the narrative is done from on stage, as like a stand-up telling you the story of it. So I was like, that feels like the way to tell this story about stand-ups and to connect it with an everyday audience. And I've spoken to people in America who have watched it, and it is like a thing that American comics watch and share to be like, if you're going over there, you should watch this. And I know a bunch of newcomers who when I sort of do writing sessions or like chat to give advice, things like that, they have often watched that film, and it's sort of like I'm glad that it has a life now and it can just live there and it is going to be useful to people. I think Jin Hao Lee, he watched it on the day before his first show, and he got nominated for newcomer, and he said it just helped me feel less stressed about it, to see what it was like for other people. And I was like, that's great. And am I saying that I take full credit for Jin getting nominated? Yes. He would be nothing without me, and I am going to tag him in this when it's out.
So when you talk about kind of having an American comedian, do they fully know what they're letting themselves in for?
Oh, no idea. No, absolutely no idea. And I say that now as someone who is dating an American comedian who came across in 2023 and had, in hindsight, one of the best runs of anyone at the Fringe that year. That show has been, is being developed, for TV. It is like, it's being performed in America, semi-regularly at the moment, is being developed by a theatre producer, like all of these things. Chloe Radcliffe Cheat is like, so many British acts will go up there, do a show, and then bam, we got to do another show and move straight on. Whereas actually there is a value in putting together something that you're like, this is going to be a thing that I'm going to do, and it's going to have a life beyond just the Fringe. And I know like Louisa Omerland was very good at that, would go to the Fringe, do a show, and then it would like live for like 2 or 3 years on tour. And it's such a big undertaking that why aren't more people doing that? But like what is consistent amongst every American that I've ended up speaking to is that they've not been prepared for what like a tornado it is. And like it's like you're in this unrelenting pressure cooker, and every single day feels like you haven't done things that you need to do, but at the same time you still have to get up on stage and perform and do this show, knowing that there might be someone in the audience who might close some doors or open up some more doors, which will cause way more work and way more stress, but are ultimately the things that you want to do. And I think in the UK we are just so much more like embedded in that culture of go up, do that, come back down, start working on other things, see what happens with the show, that it doesn't. I know that people do get stressed, and see that in the documentary, but like it definitely, I think it shocks the Americans more, especially because they are paying for flight fares and paying like over the top money for PRs who are, it feels like the industry is very much around everyone gets paid apart from the comedians and some volunteers who are like should feel lucky that they get to like be in the world a little bit, but like producers and PR and promoters and all of that are like paid handsomely and expected to be, otherwise they won't do the work. But it's like but you as a comic, you have to put all of that money forward yourself, and you'll lose it all.
You do it for the love of it. No, I mean, talking to lots of comedians on this and musicians, it's all the same. If you've got an album or you're doing a concert tour, everyone takes a slice, and you just have to do it for the love of it.
Yeah. It's why, like, I know that, like, anyone could probably come back and be like, yeah, Stuart, you get paid to do those things as well. And you go, yeah, I think so. But, like, also, like this year I'm not directing a show. And I've sort of scaled back a bit on that recently just because of trying to focus a bit more on my own stuff, and there are a bunch of other things coming up, like directing a live show. But, like, something I have done, I directed Ruby Carr's last year, her debut, which was fantastic. But like I have had like meetings and given notes to people who are doing their debuts, and I've said I can't direct it, but like I can watch the show, I can give you notes, I can tackle a few of these things and try and give some advice, and I do that for free because it's like a useful thing. If in the future you decide you want to like work with me more, then we can discuss pay stuff and things like that. But like I think it's such an intimidating thing that like I tend to sort of start with a director. Like I do it with everyone as well, to be like, let's just do something for free first, and then if we like the setup, then we can discuss doing it properly. But to be like, I'm going to sign up to pay a couple of grand to this random person who I've never met before, and they're going to direct my show because they are tangentially related to a few other award-winning shows. I just think it's just so stressful, and as an industry is like pushing that on people, or being like, you're doing your debut, you need a director. You're like, do you, or is this like some weird arms race where the pressure is put on young comedians to like spend as much money as they possibly can in the chance of this is your only shot at making it? And I just think it just like the industry is very bad on pushing people to spend that money and to make emotional commitments to things that I think are ultimately could harm them in the long run. And I mean, do
you think it's changed a lot now? I mean, do you think, a few years ago you could kind of go up to the Fringe with a rough and ready thing and improve, and by the end of it you've got a nice show? But now do you have to have that nice show ready by the start of the month?
Well, I remember when I started, people were saying that has gone from the Fringe, So it feels like that is just like this like perpetual thing of believing that it's what it always used to be. And sure, maybe it was in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, maybe it started to shift, and then I was doing it from the 2010s. But like, maybe I'm speaking from a privileged position of being unprivileged in the fact that no one paid attention to me in the industry for like a good few years, that I got to just make the mistakes and just grow and get better without that many eyes on me. And sure, does that mean that now a bunch of producers are just like, yeah, we know Stuart, he's been going a while, we're not that interested in him? Sure. But it has allowed me to get better without people seeing those mistakes. So I'm sure like if you're going up there and the glare is on you, it's pressure. And you just think, well, I'll do it. I'll spend the money. I'll take that risk because if it pays off, it's worth the money. And obviously, a huge chunk of this industry has money to burn that they can come in and they can spend that money, or they can spend their parents' money, or whatever their connections money is. And it's any wonder that the industry keeps doing what it does. But I don't know, because there's definitely seems to be a shift recently to people doing 2-week runs and like exploring the show, and obviously there's a level of success that you need to be able to do that. But I'm also thinking just like, if you're a newer act, to go up and just be like, my main thing for newer acts is if they're not ready to do a show, their debut or whatever, is to not do a 40-minute show, is to do a show with a friend, and they just work out every day how the split goes, whether it's 40 minutes one day, 20 minutes the other day, or whatever. And you just change your material every day, and you just have fun with it, and you don't lose that fun. Because I think a lot of people will do a 40-minute show for a whole month, then go and do a debut, and by then like they're so bored of it, and they're so stressed because they've done a 40-minute show in like the hottest cabin that's ever existed. They've burnt themselves out, and then they're like, I've got to do this again, but it's like longer now. So I just think it's about maintaining your enjoyment of the thing that you love doing for as long as possible.
I think there is a bit more of a shift to do shorter runs, do the same show for 2 years. But it is part of the reason that people do different shows each year, because there's maybe, let's say, 20 people in the industry that you're trying to catch the eye of. Someone at BBC Radio 4, someone at Channel 4, someone at Sky, maybe someone at Netflix, whoever it may be. And so, they're the pool of people. And if you do one show, well, if it didn't work that year, you need a new show to impress those people.
Yeah, and that is the race. And there is a world as well where, like, the thing that American comics think is that British fringe shows are just not very funny. And, like, that's the thing that, like, you want to be like, no, there's these and these and these. It's not quite as much as you think in one way. But, like, also, a lot of shows aren't... a lot of shows would benefit from another 6 months. It would just, like, add 20% more punchlines, and then you just go, that's such a better show. But, like, in the fringe, you don't notice that so much, because you see a bunch of shows, and then you like see one that has like a bit of live energy to it, and is like in a nice room or something, and suddenly your like spirits are lifted, and you don't notice so much that the gag rate isn't there, because you actually just like, you've had a nice day with your friends, you had some drinks, and it's a bit different to another show that the other shows that you've seen, so you're just like, this was exciting. And so maybe just going back every year is worth that swing of the that roll of the dice, to be like, maybe it doesn't have to be at 90-95% ready. It can be at, and evolving it, then it will get somewhere. Because ultimately, for TV and stuff like that, what they're looking for is like someone who is funny at their core, that they're like, I can see what I would do with that person. And like, the thing you can do if you like a person is pay for writers to add extra jokes and things like that. So that stuff isn't, it's about how do you get across your personality, your comic style. And it's like something like Jin's show was like one of the best newcomer shows I've seen in ages. It was so funny, so many jokes, but also watching him on stage is just a joy. And it just feels like a different rhythm to anyone else. So it just was like, it's no surprise to me that suddenly, the industry was like, holy shit, who's this guy? Because he's I'd seen him a couple of years before doing like 7 minutes at the Monkey Barrel Big Show, and immediately and he's improved so much from that time. But like even then, I was like, this guy's funny, and I want to watch this guy. And so yeah, maybe that's what it is. It's just going right. I roll the dice again. Let's get this show up. Let's see what I can do with it. But like the key thing is that you're selling yourself, and that's what it is. It's a trade show where you're selling yourself. And some people, the way to do that is, a joke every 6 to 8 seconds. Some it's a joke every 20 to 30 seconds, but it's like in a fun, different style, and you're doing it in an exciting way that people haven't seen before.
At that end, awards are very much a kind of big thing of it, and that kind of adds to the pressure and everything else. I mean, do you think how they're judged is fair and people get a fair crack of the whip, or do you have to kind of try and build momentum almost beforehand? So, you're kind of a fancied runner.
Oh, yeah. You definitely have to build momentum beforehand. It's so rare for someone to come from nowhere at the Fringe, and it's so rare for someone with no PR, no industry friends to suddenly be like up there and off. And there are stories of people who have taken it on themselves to go and have lunch, go and have coffee with every single member of the panel, know who the panel are, befriend them, and then they get nominated. That's not to say they didn't do a brilliant show that did deserve to be nominated, but it's also like people have worked out how to game the system. And but that's a difficult thing for anyone in the industry. As someone on the other side where, I can be considered in industry at times as a director and, I run a production company. Sometimes someone's coming, making their way over to talk to me and wanting to talk to me where I'm like, what's going on here? Why is this weird? And it's because maybe they don't quite know how to speak to people, or like their communication style is something that rubs up against me. But most likely is they're doing something called networking, which is a part of the industry. I don't happen to be very good at it, so maybe that has clouded my judgment of it. But there's also an elegant way to do it and an inelegant way to do it, and some people get away with it, some people don't.
It's when it's overtly transactional that
but also at the same time, you've got one life and you've got one career and you're never getting younger. So why not just fucking take that swing? Know that it might piss off a few snooty, like, purist comedians. And don't worry, it pisses me off as well. But it's also just like, well, that is sort of part of the job. The job isn't just to write jokes. The job is to go out there and make sure that people who can pay you money know that you can write and perform jokes. So why not do that? And, I try not to, but I also am like aware that it's useful to, know people and things like that. So it's like, well, where does it become purely transactional, and where is it like that is a person I am friends with and I like, it just happens that they open a door. But it's also, I've been doing it for over 15 years. People who open doors are friends now. And at the same time, I'm never like going, hey, do you want to open that door for me? But like at some other times, like I've like a friend is the creator of a sitcom, and I said to them, can I audition for a part in this second series, please? Like, I wouldn't have done that 5 years ago, but now I'm like, you do have to, because people actually don't quite know they don't sometimes know whether to ask or whether what you want to do. So you just say, can I do that? And they're like, oh, that would be great. Yeah.
So in terms of like kind of all the stuff you've done, you've got stuff on YouTube. You've got some of your specials on 800 Pound Gorilla, which I've spoken to before. You got a Next Up, OnlyFans. I mean, is it the case that you just kind of put things everywhere, see what works, what doesn't? Is there a strategy, or is it just kind of we'll see what works? Because no one really knows kind of where things pop off anymore.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the Next Up ones, I loved what Next Up were doing, and I was very excited to be like, I directed a bunch of their early specials, and it was like, this is great, and this is exciting, and it's, it's done so good for access as well, and making comedy more accessible for people. I love all of that. And so having those two on there was like, great. I love that they're there. And, you know, they've sold them around the world on like, you know, Virgin trains or like, you know, an Indian streaming service, and, you know, all of these things where you're like, oh, it gets you seen. But then when I started working with 800 Pound Gorilla, like I've always wanted to work in America. I've always wanted that to be a thing. That I was like, well, I've shot this and I'd love for you to take a little look at it. And if it's interesting to you, then let's talk. If it's not, I will never mention it again. And I'm sorry for bringing it up. And the fact that they were interested and like liked it, and then enough to then produce the next special, was just like, great. This gives me like, they're exciting company. I love the whole team, and I've been to their holiday parties, and they, you know, offered me work that allowed me to get a visa in the US as well. So like, there's loads of really great things there. But it was like, that opens up a new market for me, and I'd love to be associated with them and to have their expertise guide me. And in doing that, I was like, well, if I'm going to have this second one with them, I need to make sure it's a step up from the last one, production wise, but also show wise. So that's why I hired Nish to be the director of it, Nish Kumar, because I was like, I need someone who is, you know, more experienced, knows more, is better than me, and has seen the show and loved it, to help make this even better. But like, otherwise it's just like TikTok or Twitter or Instagram is just like, I just make stuff that I think is funny, and I should maybe have more of a plan. But like, at the same time, I've never been able to predict what will go viral and what will not go viral and what will turn into a thing. So I'm just like, if I think it's funny, I'm going to just do it, and then hope that, you know, either people like it or like it will lead to another thing. And, you know, there's bits in shows that are like repurposed from other things that if you've watched everything I've ever done ever, you're like, hey, I recognize that from a thing. And it might be like a video that got 2,000 views and then I deleted. And then I've gone, but there was a kernel there that was useful, because I'm just like, you know, just again, I like making stuff. If I've got the time, I will do it. And until someone gives me so much work that I don't have the time to do it, then I will keep doing it, and no matter what the platform.
We were talking at the start about Sketchburn.
Yeah.
And I know that, you know, Turtle Canyon are involved in that.
Sketchburn is a live sketch comedy night where scripts are read out by a cast on stage, then unfinished sketches are played and notes are given on the scripted and the unfinished sketches, and then the end is like some finished sketches. So it's a screening and it's a live event. It's hosted by Harry Kanth, and who is like very funny, but like also deeply cares about comedy. He set it up and, you know, emailed me about it. I couldn't make the first one. I think I made the second one, and I think I had something in both of them, and, you know, got chatting. I just loved the setup so much. And like, I've been to a few of these events, and what I think is good about them is that people who make sketches, people who are in sketches, people who are interested in sketches, and the industry go to these things, and it brings them all together. And so I just had a chat with Harry and was just like, look, this is something that Turtle Canyon we've wanted to do for ages, but like, we don't have the time. You've already set something up that we think is good. We don't want to tread on that in any way. We want you to carry on doing it as you're doing. But if some money helps, we would love to give you that money so that you can, like, you know, not have everything coming out of your pocket. The performers are getting paid a little bit, you know, you can pay a bit into marketing. We can start expanding this, and it can be a thing that grows and becomes a thing that everyone, you know, goes to every couple of months, meets interesting people. And I was like, and if you need, like, you know, a helping hand or advice or anything like that, I'm sure we can, you know, either supply that, or if we need kit or something like that. But basically, it was just like, this is the exact sort of thing that Turtle Canyon started around. We started making stuff because we just love making stuff. And now we're in a position to be like, oh, we can give you a little bit of money to, like, make this so that people who are newer to the industry have an in, or like it doesn't seem as mystical, or like they can go not have their own projects screened or anything, but watch others and see what they're like in an early state, what the notes are, and then maybe later on it gets filmed and it gets screened there, and it's like an interesting thing to do. And it's something that like we've done at Turtle Canyon so much work in the last 5 years on specials and things like that, that like and it's stressful running a business where you're trying to pay bills and you're trying to do, you know, all these projects on like pilot stuff behind the scenes and things like that, but like so much doesn't get put out publicly that I was like, this is a good way and a good inspiration for me to be like, oh, we're going to just make a thing, we're going to do it, we're going to get it out there, and to, you know, to offer like a vision. The ideal for Turtle Canyon is at some point we'll be able to be making more content and to be, you know, we've done in the past like writers schemes. There's been people like Rhiannon Shaw was like a winner of a writing scheme we did, and she has written on my shows. I have directed her shows. You know, there's so many people that like have started with us that have like then grown and they moved on to other projects that I'm like so proud of, and that I want Turtle Canyon to keep being that like potential helping hand to people, because it can be quite a tough industry, and obviously it's difficult to achieve that, and I'm sure we're not in lots of ways, but like we're doing what we can, sort of thing.
Thanks to Stuart for coming on the podcast. You can find out more details in the show notes, including where to find him at the Fringe and elsewhere, including his online stand-up specials. If you enjoyed this, check out our other episodes with a variety of comedians, musicians, authors and others in creative industries. Thanks for listening.